Hi, Aileen. How you doing?
Hi, Emma. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me with you today.
You're more than welcome, and thanks for being here at the Mindful Mums podcast.
Great.
So,
I'm really, really looking forward to it.
yeah, we're gonna tell everybody how we've met in a sec, but I just want to highlight that we're here really to help women, other mums and women, navigate the ups and downs of life. Um, we've had many conversations before now. Elaine and myself are both EFT practitioners. So we've had many conversations before now about our emotional mental well-being, things that we struggle with and how we navigate that, and how I suppose we work on ourselves to better ourselves. And that was my reason for wanting you on the podcast, Aileen, because you've really supported me and helped me with some of my sort of crazy negative thoughts that I have in going through those EFT practices with me. And I really appreciate that. So I know you're going to bring so much value to any lady, any woman that's listening to this podcast today.
Thank you so much. And it's just so encouraging to get that feedback because that's really why I do this. I want women, people, whatever gender or gender fluid, to know that they can be free, they can be whole, they can be themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. So tell us a bit about you. Tell us a bit about
Okay.
Elaine and Elaine's story, what she does.
Yeah, so my name's Aileen. Because I have such an unusual name, I do get called a whole bunch of things. I get called Aileen, Eileen, Elaine, Alison, even. So I answer to a whole mixture of names. And I'm called Aileen because my mum is Scottish, and she
Okay,
said if I had to be brought up in England, I had to have a Scottish name.
love that.
Um, so I have two kids now. I thought I would never have kids because I was
Okay,
very, very, very scared and fearful of childbirth and parenting. But
okay.
we ended up fostering two beautiful girls for a little while, and then we have two children of our own. They're
Wonderful.
9 and 12, a girl and
Okay.
a boy.
Yeah.
And I have a husband called Nick, and he is a vicar. We're currently in Fannington in Canterbury
Okay.
and learning what on earth it is to be a clergy family because that's a whole different kettle of fish. Um,
Wow. Okay.
but yeah, me myself, I feel I have a real call to just help people be more authentically themselves, and that's my desire for myself too, is to feel freer to be me.
It's music to my ears because that's something us women, everybody struggles with, right?
Absolutely,
Just
I
sort of
think so.
being, yeah, being able to just stand there and, speak from the heart, be true to themselves and not try and be like everybody else.
I know. Yep.
Because we all want to fit in, don't we?
Yes, we do. That deep desire to belong
Mm,
means that it's very easy to just try and fit.
mm,
And so often when we don't fit, we then feel even more uncomfortable. And perhaps other people sense that too,
mm,
But when we can choose to be in the places where we light up a room, where people want us there, or where we put
mm,
people at ease,
mm.
then we're at ease ourselves too. And then life just flows much more easily.
Oh, definitely. So, how do we go about doing that? What are some of the things that we can do to try and be authentically ourselves?
Mm. This is something I've been really wondering about recently.
Mm,
As part of our journey to become a clergy family, we've had
mm,
to live, well, not had to live, we had the opportunity to live
mm.
in a couple of places we'd never lived before. And
Okay.
that has given us the opportunity to really ask ourselves, well, who are we?
Mm,
If I'm not where I've always lived, who
mm,
actually am I? If I'm not always with the people I've been with,
mm,
who am I?
mm,
And I must admit, there's been times where I thought, I don't know. I don't
mm,
know if I'm not where I always lived. I don't know.
mm,
So I've found I've been on a bit of a journey to work out who I am. Who am I, regardless of where I live,
mm.
regardless of who I'm with or what job I have.
Yes.
And there are elements of me that are the same wherever I am. So I love being colourful.
Mm,
I love music.
mm,
I do tend to be quite spontaneous and creative. I love wonder. You know, just the awe of things brings me alive, and I love people. So what I've discovered in that journey is it's really important for me to find places where I can be with people and actually be fun and vivacious and full of energy, and that's okay. It's also really important that I take proper time to rest too, because all that fun and vivaciousness can be a bit exhausting, especially now I have kids.
Yeah, I can
So
imagine.
booking in deep time, deep rest, I've discovered for me is really important. And I think most of all, I've learned in the last 2 years how vital it is that I choose to plant myself, to go and be in places where I fit. And I didn't always do that. In fact, I probably didn't realize it was okay to do that. But having moved to Canterbury just under 2 years ago, I'm really practicing and enjoying choosing where to be and choosing the places where I naturally seem to fit, rather than trying to mold myself into other people's templates of what's needed or who I am.
Yeah, I love that. And what a lesson for your kids. What a
I
lesson
hope
that
so.
is for your kids. Yeah, because that's challenging. I mean, my eldest, she's at school here, just literally opposite where we live. And like I recognize when I drop her up there, or she'll walk up there, like the girls, they're all trying to look the same, that they get to a certain
Yeah.
age and they might roll their skirts up a little bit more, and they might apply a bit more makeup, and they're straightening their hair, and you just see this consistent image of how they look. And I see it, and then I'm like, wow, like we're all trying to look like everybody else. We're all trying to be like everybody else to fit in, because it's quite scary if we stand out and we are, different. We want to be liked, don't we?
Yes.
Um, so I think that's such a powerful lesson as a parent to our kids. If we can sort of stand in our own truth and our own authenticity, and we encourage our kids to do that, what a beautiful creative world we would have,
Yeah.
wouldn't we?
And I mean, what you're describing is fantastic. And it was what I guess it would be what lots of us would want if we were brave and vulnerable, to quote Brené Brown, brave and
Mm,
vulnerable enough to
mm,
go there. But
mm,
it can be scary. I want to acknowledge
mm,
that to the listeners. It
mm,
hasn't been an easy journey at all. There's been lots of trying to work out who I am, and that can be a bit lonely at
mm,
times. There's
mm,
been trying things, and some of it works and some of it doesn't.
mm,
Of course, lots of us don't always have the freedom to just choose where
yeah,
we go or just what we do.
mm,
Actually, we need to be in work, or we need to be in a role, or the caring role of a parent, or work perhaps multiple jobs to
mm,
just get enough money to live and survive. So
mm,
not all of us have lots of freedom to do
mm,
this.
mm,
But I would encourage listeners, where you have some self-advocacy, where you have some autonomy,
mm,
try where you can to choose to do the things that give you life. And that
mm,
might only be an hour a week to start with, especially
mm,
if you've got a new child.
yeah,
Um, but try where you can in little ways to do the things that are authentically you, and spend time, if you can, with the people
mm,
who you feel at ease with,
mm,
because it makes life easier to function. And actually, I think we have a better chance of flourishing if we're actually
yeah,
with the people and the places, at least
yeah,
some of the time, where we can be ourselves.
yeah. And I think deep down we all know those places, don't we? Because they just feel so aligned to us. Like when you were saying that, there's me, I'm looking outside and I want to get amongst nature, or I want to go to the beach and just sit on my own on the beach, listening to the waves, just looking at this vast space. and yeah, that's when we can really sort of tune in, I think, to that inner self.
Mm.
And then I suppose asking ourselves the questions, as in, like you said, who am I? Who do I want to be? Who is it?
Yeah.
Who do I want to become? And all that kind of stuff, which is so amazing. So when you're talking, I'm thinking sort of it feels so spiritual. And I
It
know
is.
that's a part of your life.
Yeah, it is.
And you've recently been involved in, or you're undertaking a course at the moment, aren't you?
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a
So
little bit about that?
yeah, you're absolutely right. It is spiritual because a lot of it is about that inner work. The who am I? How do I connect with others? How do I connect with the flow of love that is naturally in the world and wanting us to flow with it?
Mm,
It is spiritual. And I think for me, I was brought up a Christian, but the form of Christianity was probably quite rule focused
mm,
rather than um, about being in a relationship and a connection with something
mm,
bigger and connected with everybody else.
mm,
And when I had children, I actually trained with an organization called Birthing from Within. And it's not a Christian organization, but it does recognize the spiritual aspect of becoming a parent and
mm,
how this is an inner journey as well
mm,
as, your newborn parents as well as newborn baby.
mm,
And that has led me on a more contemplative path, a
mm,
more reflective, thoughtful, doing that inner work path than perhaps
mm.
I was on before. Um, and yeah, and I'm find the course I'm doing now is to train to be a spiritual accompanier or a spiritual
Okay.
director. I prefer the term accompanier because I like the idea of actually accompanying people in their spiritual journey more than director, which sounds
Mm,
like I might be directive.
mm,
Um, but a spiritual accompanier is someone who actually listens to the person sharing, but
mm,
also listens to what the Holy Spirit is saying at the same time, and tries to help direct people to that connection, to that source of love that we all really, really need and are so hungry for.
mm. And when you say Holy Spirit, because I was raised Catholic, so when
Yeah.
I think of a Holy Spirit, I think of somebody else out there that I'm sort of, I suppose, especially when I was younger, sort of worshipping.
Mm.
But you see it differently. Am I right in saying you see the Holy Spirit differently? Only through
Yeah.
conversations that we've had.
Yeah.
Talk to me about
It's
that, because
really,
I found this really interesting when I spoke to you about this before.
yeah, it's really interesting that you picked up on that, Emma, because yeah, my image of God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus and God the Father has changed a lot in the
Mm,
last 2 or 3 years, along with this journey. As I get to know myself more,
mm,
I feel I'm getting to know God more. And the more I get to know God more, the more I'm getting to know myself more. The
okay.
two seem to go hand in hand.
Okay.
And yes, I used to think of God as someone who was personal, but I also used to think of God as someone who was a person and therefore potentially over there, and
Yes.
I needed to get there.
Yes.
And it was really interesting because when I talked to people, I started to notice I was doing that. I was pointing,
Yeah.
I need to get to God. I want to be where God is. And I caught myself and I was like, why am I doing that? What is going on internally
Yeah.
that's got me doing this with my hands subconsciously that I'm not even aware of?
Yeah.
So that was part of my journey, was to say, well, do I believe that? Do I believe God or the Holy Spirit is over there and I've got to get there? I've got
Yeah.
to meet that standard. I've got to get from where I am to them. Or
Yeah.
actually, more and more do I see God as the source and the life and the love that actually flows through everything.
Thing. Yeah.
So it's the God, it's hard to use pronouns or to use terms that describe it, God, them. Um, I've more and more I feel like God is very personal, but not a distant person. That
Okay.
actually God is the thing, the flow, the love that is in all things or has potential to be in all things.
Okay.
So the fullness of the light, because I've got a big light in front of me to try and help, the picture be clear. The fullness of the light, the beauty of the light in our world is God in that light. The most amazing taste of cake is God in that cake.
Okay.
That when I can flow in the most kindest way to myself or to others, that's God flowing through me.
Okay.
And sometimes I can step into that flow and be part of it. And sometimes I go, no, I don't want to do that. And actually,
Yeah.
when I don't step into that flow, it tends to get harder work, and I'll be striving, or I'll be fretting, or I'll be missing the mark,
Yeah.
and not quite taking the life that's available to me, not quite appreciating what's being offered with open hands, to say, come and join the dance kind of thing, rather than come and get where I am because you're not in the right place or you're not good enough and come and be where I am. It's not, it's more, here's my hands. They're a millimeter away from you. Come and join the dance.
That sounds beautiful and sounds very non-judgmental, which I think
Yes.
sounds lovely. Judgmental as in like you're not judging others, but you're not judging yourself either.
I'm learning that
Yeah,
it's going to be a life's work.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not there yet. It is going to
No,
be a life's
I
work,
yeah, I
but
don't do we ever get there
exciting.
either?
No, I think it's a
Okay,
life's work.
this work, yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
When you're talking as well, Aileen, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing that right. It sounds it's like energy. It's like
Yeah,
this
yeah,
energy moving through everything. Um, and I know, I suppose I say I know with myself, there are times when I feel in flow. So whether I'm connecting with that energy and it's moving through me into and I'm connecting with other people in my environment and I feel in flow. But then there are times when it's really jagged and I feel like I'm pinging from one place to the next.
yeah,
And that's where I feel quite challenged and my emotions are all over the show. My
yeah,
thoughts are going crazy. I can go from thinking and feeling great gratitude and love and really, just positive thoughts as in, oh, this, look at this. And I seem to have everything sussed and worked out to the complete opposite in like the space of a minute. Like
yes.
it's just and then I'm like, what the hell? Everything was fine a minute ago. And you touched on just now, I suppose, navigating that. And you mentioned inner work.
Mm.
Inner work. What does that look like for you, inner work? Because
So,
when
go
I'm
on.
talking to you,
Mm.
and I as soon as I met you and we did our first EFT practice, you're very calm. When you come across very pretty solid and very calm and consistent. But what I'm hearing, that's not necessarily true at times, which is
It's
good for
certainly not
everyone
true at
listening.
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's certainly not true at times. Yeah, I just say to everybody, as a child, I was like a Tasmanian devil whirlwind. I had so much energy, my parents couldn't keep up with me. And there is still an element of me like that. And actually, that's something unique I bring to the world, because if a place needs some energy or needs to make something happen, I can do that. I can make something happen. But I think especially in the last 12 years, I've learned this other side. Perhaps it's a balance, to
Mm,
go along with the Tasmanian devil whirlwind. I need a stillness and a
mm,
quietness.
mm,
Otherwise, I'm going to exhaust myself, kind of,
mm,
it'd be too much even for me, never mind anybody else.
mm,
So for me, the inner work has been a lot of dealing with and facing my fears. So I guess some people might call it shadow work.
mm,
And some people, some of what I've done would be inner child work.
mm.
Actually, I use journaling a lot, as well as prayer and EFT
Yeah.
recently,
Yeah.
to actually try and be honest with myself about what makes me happy and what's worth celebrating, but also what makes me really scared and what makes me fearful.
Mm,
And I've done a lot of that in the last 12 years because I used to be really fearful and traumatized about the idea of having children.
mm,
So I did loads and loads of inner work to deal with that fear. And Birthing from Within helped with that, the organization I trained with. And then other things have helped along the way. And
mm,
using journaling and art, I was able to open up, well, who is Aileen really? Because I
mm,
knew no one else was going to read it. You know,
nice.
I could have conversations with God about, okay, you already know this about me. I'm really
Mm,
scared to admit it. And I'm
mm,
writing in my journal, I'm really scared to admit it. You
mm,
know, but I want to learn to be compassionate with myself. I
mm.
want to
Oh,
learn
that's
to
beautiful.
be flexible with myself because I realized how many rules I had in my life to try and keep me safe and secure. But actually, the rules can end up feeling really stifling,
Mm,
or they can make me get myself into situations that actually don't serve me. If I think I must be there and I ought to do this and I ought to do that, and actually when I go there and I ought to do this and ought to do that and I try to, just goes badly wrong. And
mm,
my intuition's screaming at me going, get out, just
mm,
get, don't bother, don't
mm.
bother. And then the other part of me is going, but the rule says you must do this.
Yeah, yeah,
So the journaling just helps me notice lots of that stuff. And
yeah.
then in the noticing, I can deal with it with God or with some CBT or with some
Mm.
EFT or with some kind of other therapeutic technique that helps me deal with it or let go of it if it's time to let it go.
Interesting. Yeah. You mentioned about you was really scared of parent. Was it parenthood? Was it becoming a parent, or was it actually birthing a child, or was it a bit of
Yeah,
both?
both,
It
definitely
was a bit of
both.
both.
Yeah.
Is that something that was always with you, do you think, from a young age, or is it just something that as you grew up and you were contemplating doing having children that came about?
Yeah, I think when I was young, it just felt like something so distant, it was irrelevant. But as I probably got into my 20s and people all around me started having children,
Okay,
or I got married when I was 23.
okay,
So people then start going, oh, you're going to have kids.
yeah,
Ah, I'm going, no, run away.
yeah, yeah.
It was then that it became more and more obvious. Um, and yeah, I felt it needed dealing with one of my rules, one of my lovely rules. Aileen, you need to deal with this because you're
Yes.
married to someone who really wants children.
Okay.
So I felt, although Nick didn't hassle me at all in any way, shape, or form, I was like, how's this going to work? Because one of us really wants kids and one of us really doesn't.
Okay.
So something's going to have to give here.
Sure.
Perhaps, at least if I deal with the fear, I can then decide whether I really do want them or not, rather than just being ruled by the fear.
So courageous. And I think that's so,
Scary.
well, yeah, but it's so insightful because so many of us, something presents itself that's fearful. Maybe it triggers something from our childhood or our past in some way. And the majority of people get out of there, right? It's like, because it, everything's telling us to run. It's very hard to sort of be courageous enough to recognize what's going on and look it in the eye and go, right, how do I deal with this?
Yeah,
That's a lesson. That's a whole lesson in itself on how you go about doing that. Because I'm sure there's so many people that will be listening to this going, right, well, I've got this thing presenting itself at the moment that's scaring the crap out of me.
yeah,
And I can't seem to get past it. I just keep running away from it.
yeah. It's interesting you say that because you're right. This presents itself in all forms of life, not just fear about birth, but in all
Okay.
sorts of ways. And yes, lots of people will bury their head in the sand and just go, la 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 la, it will go away if I don't think about it, or will run away, or will fight, or some other kind of instinctual response. But what I found is, if I found a safe place to deal with it, so a group that I go to, or a therapist or an educator who will support me in dealing with it, as long as I've got that safe container to hold me while I do this deep inner work, it is actually better, if you can, to face it. Because what I found, I think every time, is when I faced the fear, it was nowhere near as big as I thought it was when I was trying to ignore it. Because the whole time I was trying to ignore it, it loomed over me and it felt huge. But when I brought it into the light, I realized it was nowhere near as big. Yeah. So I guess, I don't know if any of you read the Gruffalo's Child story. You've got that mouse that scares the life out of the Gruffalo's child by looming over them. But really, the mouse is this big. And when we are held safely and there's a container, and when I say container, I mean you've set aside space to do this work, or you've found some people who will hold you as you do this work, then it really is worth doing, because the fear can be released when you look at it, and it tends to not be anywhere near as big as you thought it was, because it looms bigger when we hide or pretend it's not there.
Yes, definitely. It's funny, I was having a conversation with my daughter, literally, or it's happened a couple of times this week, actually. Yesterday, my daughter had, she was due to bring her bikeability, they call it bikeability here. I don't know if you have the same thing where you are.
Yeah, we do.
But she was due to bring her bike into school. And we had a really busy week last week. And I saw the message and I said to my middle daughter, do you want to do it? And she said, no, I don't want to do it. So I didn't really think anything of it. Gone into school yesterday morning. And we've got to school. I've dropped her off and I've seen a few of them hanging around outside. They've got non-school uniform on because they're going to do their bikeability. So I drove off and I thought about it and I thought, should I encouraged her? I didn't even have the conversation with her as to why she didn't want to do it. I just sort of said, oh, okay. I think just because my head is in 150 different places at that time, not that that's an excuse, because that's a conversation I should have had. Anyway, I went into reception. I said to our lovely receptionist at the school, I said, if she decides she wants to do it, just let me know. I'll go home and I'll bring the bike in. I said, just give me a shout. But she's told me she doesn't want to do it. 5 minutes later, Aileen, as I'm driving home, I get the message she's just come in and said she wants to give it a go. So I've got in, I've got a Mini. I'm trying to shove the bike in the back of the Mini, get her a change of clothes. I had 2 calls yesterday morning, so I didn't think about that. I was just like, right, I've got to get this back to her at school. And she did it. And she came home yesterday and I spoke to her and I said, like, so what was that about? Why didn't you want to do it? You know, I said, Mummy should have had that conversation with you before. And she said, I was really scared, Mummy. I said, well, what was you scared of? And it was because the year before, she'd attempted to do it the year before, and she came home with all these stickers and things. And I just presumed she'd done it, but she hadn't. She'd attempted to do it, and because she had to go out onto the roads, and it was down a couple of hills, and she can ride a bike, but she was a little bit shaky on it. She bottled it, and she didn't do it last year. So the fear hadn't gone away; it had presented itself. But her wonderful teacher had just said to her, look, Elsie, give it a go. Mum's bought the bike and give it a go. And if you decide it's not going to work, you know, if you're doing it and it's still really scaring you for whatever reason, you can stop. Yeah. And that's such a lesson in itself, isn't it? And it's what you've just said. Something presents itself. It scares the shit out of us. So we're inclined to run away. But if we can just be strong enough and courageous enough just to lean into it a little bit and give it a go, we find that actually it's nowhere near as bad as we made it up in our mind to be. Yeah. And then our comfort zone gets bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And we feel a bit braver. And we feel like, okay, these things don't have a hold on me. Because the more in life that doesn't have a hold on us, the freer we can be.
Yeah.
And lots of us desire to actually, deep down, we desire to be free. Yes, we want safe boundaries and we want safe containers. And yes, we want some predictability to feel secure. But we don't want to be held by fear.
No, we certainly don't. We
And it
certainly
was
don't.
lovely, listening to you, it was lovely that the teacher and you provided that safe container for your daughter. You know, she didn't decide that on her own, that she'd just give it a go. Her teacher and you provided the safe container to say, it's okay to try, and then decide whether it's for you and you want to carry on or not. That was lovely. Gave her the bravery to take the first step.
That's it. And that's like why you say it's so important to be around the right people. And not someone that's going to go like I did initially, oh, okay, that's fine. But actually someone that's going to maybe get you to see things or see it in a different way, or maybe just you question it and why don't I want to do that? What's stopping me? What's the reason behind it? So you can sort of break that down and try and work out why. I love that. I really do love that. So tell us a little bit more, because I know you do birthing courses, don't you? Whether it's birth recovery courses or you help women who maybe are pregnant and they're really fearing giving birth.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So 12 years ago, I did, even after all this fear and dealing with some of the fear, I did go on to have my first child. And she was born by cesarean.
Okay.
And then 2.5 years later, I had my second child and he was born at home.
Lovely.
And the different experiences I had and the work I did with each of them, plus the training I did to become an antenatal educator, all of that came together to help me overcome my fear of birth. So I've now got to the stage where, although I know our maternity services are absolutely in crisis, and they really are, especially here in Canterbury in East Kent, it's, you know, they've been in the papers and it's been the worst it is. I know that our maternity service is in crisis because the staff are in crisis, you know, and the system is in crisis. And the people who are pregnant or have had a child here have had to step or felt they've needed to step into this crisis system. And unfortunately, they then get affected by that, you know. But what I do know is that humans and people are even more resilient and able and capable and can heal even from a system in crisis.
Yes.
So my faith in our ability to cope with the unexpected, to deal with the traumatic, is much greater now than my fear of it happening in the first place. And that meant I trained, and I now offer lots of support to people who are fearful or anxious before or after birth or of parenting. And I lead retreats for people who aren't parents or carers as well. And my desire is to help people realize that when we do the inner work, when we do face our fears in a safe container with safe people, we can be more free. So yes, and 2 years ago, I started a CIC, so a community interest company. So My Birth Support CIC began after 8 years of offering the same kind of support, but just as a voluntary organization. But as a community interest company, we can apply for grants, and it means all our support is now affordable as well.
Fantastic.
So I offer groups and courses for people before birth, especially if they're fearful or anxious about what's coming. And I offer that one-to-one as well. And then I do birth recovery courses for people who've had some kind of unexpected or unwanted pregnancy, birth, or postnatal experience, so that people are held safely to work through that difficult stuff. And also get given, to some degree, some sort of map of how to navigate the most unknown aspects of this whole journey that they're on, because they're on a journey into parenthood. And sometimes it helps to have some people with a map or some signposts to help you along the way. And the grants helpers do that online and in person in a really affordable way, so that people just pay what they can. So, and if they're on universal credit, it's free or it's only a very small amount. And that means that my hope is that no one will feel they can't do it because they can't afford it.
I love that. I love that. And it is about support, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about having that support, like you say, having people around you whereby you feel safe and doing the inner work.
Yes. And the analogy of a caterpillar to go into a butterfly does get overused. But when I'm talking about a safe container, it is like that cocoon, that people who do work like me or other people, they provide that container so that when you do this work that to some degree unpicks and you end up undoing all or some of who you thought you were.
Yeah.
And you need to know that all of that's still going to be held. None of it's going to be lost until you've decided what you want to keep or what you want to let go of. But they provide that container like the cocoon so that when the caterpillar completely goes to goo, it's going to be held until it has fully transformed into the butterfly. And then it's got a new life and it has to learn to be a butterfly, which is very different to being a caterpillar. So that safe container, that's what I mean by a safe container. And therapists talk about being a safe container or a safe pair of hands for people to do their work they need to do on themselves.
I love that. I love that. Ooh. So you have got a birth recovery
It's
course.
nice
You
how
have
you
them.
just breathed.
It is, yeah, because it feels so I feel it just feels so warm and it feels just comfortable, because this is it, isn't it? We tend to hold on to a lot of stuff that sometimes we don't even want to hold on to, but it's our identity, isn't it? It's what we know. So,
Right.
and it's who we see ourselves to be. So to let go of that is like, well, if I let go of that, who am I? What am I? You know, it's really quite, that feels uncomfortable, but hearing what you're saying and having someone provide that container, you know, whatever it is that you're going to be in, and it's going to still hold on to all of the stuff that maybe you do want to let go of, but it's not telling you to let go of it. It's just helping you understand it and navigate it and decide on what's best, not what's right for you, but what's best for you, which feels really lovely. That's where the sigh came
and
from.
To teach you. Yeah, absolutely. And to teach you as well. I mean, my background is I was a teacher. I was a design teacher in secondary schools. And I used to do advisory work in lots of different schools and train people how to be teachers. So I love helping people learn. You know, teaching and learning is one of my passions.
Yeah.
So another aspect of what I do is actually teaching people the strategies to help them deal with or let go of stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of therapy will be someone leading a process and someone following.
Yes.
Or it will be a group environment where you're listened to.
Yes.
But there aren't many people out there actually teaching you how to use some techniques that will help you. So I know you do, Emma, because you do EFT and I've been learning EFT as well. And that is something we teach someone to use. So they actually go away with a tool for life. And I love that about EFT.
Yeah.
And the journaling I do a monthly journaling group called Maternal Journal, and it's offered online. And that actually gets people practicing and playing around with ideas with journaling so that they learn how journaling can help them with their mental health and emotional well-being. And when we find people who will actually teach us things, we then have a whole toolkit that can help us whenever something difficult comes up again. And because of my teaching background, that's what I do in my courses. I actually teach people a whole toolkit of things that they can use at different times in different ways based on where they're at and what's going on for them.
Sounds fantastic. Sounds fantastic. And I will certainly be linking through to that. So we'll have to share those details with me. And if anyone's watching on YouTube, we'll put a link to that in the feed, and also on the Spotify, on the podcast feed.
Thank you.
Aileen, that's been a wonderful. I feel enlightened. I feel like, yeah, I do. I feel really relaxed. And I think you've got so much wisdom. And like I said to you before, like when we first met and how you were just seemed so calm and so content and just like you had it all sussed. And when you were doing your EFT practice with me and everything, as soon as I started talking to you, I felt like my shoulders dropped and everything. I calmed myself down. So you've definitely got that presence and that way about you. So even though I'm sure you're paddling like a
under the water like this,
yeah,
going out.
yeah, like a swan as fast as your little paddles can go. So just thanks for sharing your wisdom. It's been lovely having you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Wow.
Yeah, and I will be speaking to you again soon, I hope.
I hope, definitely. I'm well up for that.
All
Thank
right,
you, Emma.
Take care. Catch up
Thank you,
soon.
listeners.
See you
See you soon.
later.